Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us here today. My name is David Medina, and I'm the co-founder and COO of Results for America. And we're proud to be hosting today's session along with our partners, the U.S. Conference of Mayors and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Today, we'll be focused on the National Clean Investment Fund, which is a $14 billion program that provides low-interest financing to projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and promote clean energy. 3 national nonprofits have been selected by the EPA to review and approve applications for NCIF low-interest financing: the Climate United Fund, the Coalition for Green Capital, and Power Forward Communities. Thankfully, we'll have the opportunity to hear directly from all of these organizations today about the programs they manage and what strategies cities should use to access funding for your clean energy projects. And as always, we want this to be an interactive session, so please post your questions and comments in the chat, and we'll get to as many as possible during our Q&A session. And so now I'm pleased to welcome our first speaker, Doug Sims. He's the Managing Director of Green Finance and Economic Development at the Natural Resources Defense Council, and he'll be providing an overview of the National Clean Investment Fund today and facilitate presentations by representatives from the 3 organizations chosen to provide this low-income, low-interest financing. So thanks for joining us today, Doug. The Zoom is yours.
Thanks, David. Hi, everybody. Very excited to be here today. I'm Doug Sims, as David said, and I work at NRDC, which is a 54-year-old global environmental organization. Recently, I've taken a lead role in convening green banks and community development financial institutions, driving a common agenda focused on net zero emissions inclusive growth. I also took a year last year off to help run one of the GGRF applicants that was successful, called Justice Climate Fund. And I've spent a lot of time working with Bloomberg Philanthropies on cities projects, including the Bloomberg American Sustainable Cities Initiative, which is had launched earlier this year. So short story is really interested in the intersection of cities and greenhouse gas reduction fund and green bank and CDFI. So I'm excited to have this conversation today. So quickly, what is GGRF? At a high level, it's an effort to bring together financing for climate and financing for communities. Green banks are sort of a newish invention, but they've been a critical part of the U.S. energy financing landscape for about a decade. The green bank concept came out of the need to de-risk and accelerate investments in clean energy projects by blending public and private capital. Connecticut established first green bank in 2011, and since then, a host of other states, including places like New York, California, Nevada, have also launched almost 50 to date. And also some cities have launched green banks like Washington, D.C. and counties like Montgomery County in Maryland. CDFIs, community development financial institutions, play a crucial role also in the NCIF scheme by helping channel capital to underserved communities, ensuring that climate investments are equitable and inclusive, and supporting projects that drive both environmental and social benefits in areas that have been historically left out of the clean energy transition. So digging a little bit deeper into the GGRF, as David said, it's a $27 billion program overall, which is focusing on both communities and greenhouse gas reduction nationwide. The fund aims to do this by leveraging green banks and CDFIs and other entities like impact funds to scale up investments in clean energy and energy efficiency, and also transportation and other sectors. It's really an unprecedented initiative designed to promote environmental justice, create jobs, and reduce climate impacts across all sectors. A significant portion of this funding will flow through green banks and CDFIs, but also will flow directly from the entities you'll hear from today. So let's dive into the NCIF. Out of that 27 billion, 14 billion is allocated to the NCIF. And it's an important, NCIF means National Climate Investment Fund. This is an investment fund for climate and community. It specifically targets both for-profit entities also cities, states, tribal governments, as well as other organizations to help accelerate their climate action plans. It provides flexible capital that can be used to support a wide range of projects, including innovative solutions like electric vehicle infrastructure and building electrification. What makes NCIF really compelling, that it's not just about funding individual projects. It's about building markets. It's about pre-developing projects and building long-term capacity within cities to mobilize sustainable investment and unlock private capital at scale. The NCIF specifically can help cities overcome traditional barriers like high upfront costs and perceived risks by providing loans and other financial tools like credit enhancements, loan loss reserves, and co-investment mechanisms. So when it comes to cities, as we turn towards our participants today, what should you bear in mind as you think about leveraging GGRF funding? I'll make a few suggestions. First, think about which projects in your capital improvement plans align with GGRF funding. Net zero building, net zero transportation, renewable energy and storage are priorities, but also other areas are possible. Listen closely to our participants. Number two, determine what community lenders, be they green banks or CDFIs or others, are active in your region and what sectors they serve. Three, dig into where public-private partnerships may be appropriate. NCIF funds can be a critical tool in attracting private investment. Consider how you can use this funding to de-risk projects and encourage private sector participation. The goal should be to leverage every public money dollar to attract multiple dollars in private investment. Four, think about environmental justice. 40% at least of GGRF money must benefit low-income and disadvantaged communities. Understand which projects may qualify, which census tracts in your city. These investments might not only improve equity, but also unlock additional state and federal incentives. And last, look for connections to other federal programs. Direct pay is a program that allows local governments and nonprofits to be reimbursed for up to 50% or more of project costs for certain qualifying projects placed in service. However, funding for the upfront costs must be found elsewhere, potentially through GGRF. So I'm going to leave it there and turn to our illustrious panel. First, we're going to have, excuse me, my lights go out occasionally in this room. First, we're going to have a representative from Climate United, which is Crystal Langhals, who is Chief Community Officer of the Climate United Fund. Crystal, over to you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today. My name is Crystal Langhals, as you said. So the Community Department of Climate United oversees our impact measurement and management, our pre-development grant programs, and our outreach and stakeholder engagement. So lovely to be with you today. I am from the lovely city of Fort Collins, Colorado. So shout out to Joanne for repping our beautiful town. And I am here to talk about our coalition, Climate United. So next slide, please. So just want to share, we're still very much we have gone through our contracting process with the EPA, but we're continuing to learn about what is possible through our work and continue to have a partnership with the EPA to discern and understand our guidance. So just want to give our little disclaimer we give at the beginning of all of our presentations that we're continuing to digest and disseminate our work. And so as I answer questions that you have them, just know that we might have additional guidance later that learn that we need to pivot or adjust as we continue to learn through this program. Next slide. So Climate United is a collaboration of experienced mission-driven lenders and investors dedicated to bringing clean energy solutions to Justice 40 communities across the country. So Calvert Impact, where I got to be part of our startup work with Climate United, is a nonprofit impacting investing firm located in Bethesda, Maryland, that has been investing in climate solutions for over 30 years. Also part of our coalition is the Community Preservation Corporation, which is a leading expert in affordable family housing. And last but not least, the other main part of our coalition is Self-Help, which is a family of credit unions and CDFIs, largely located in the South, California, and the Midwest, that serve and focus on serving low-income and disadvantaged communities. They are leading our single family and consumer strategies. Next slide. So just for context, just want to share that we are very excited to cover and work in all 10 EPA regions, and that we want to have projects everywhere in all towns across the United States. Next slide. In general, as we think about our goals and deployment, as Doug shared, 40% of all of the National Clean Investment Fund have to go to low income and disadvantaged communities. Climate United has set a goal to go a little bit deeper than that. And actually, our deployment goal is that 60% of our funds would go to serve low income and disadvantaged communities. Additionally, would like to serve 20% in rural communities and 10% in tribal communities. Next slide. As you think about our strategy and how our portfolio works, we find this very helpful. You can call this our 3-7-3 strategy. So we have 3 green sectors that we're specifically focused on serving, which is green homes and buildings, distributed energy generation and storage. So those are generally across the National Clean Investment, the priority projects of the National Clean Investment Fund. And that is where most of our projects will be focused. And we're doing that through serving 3 market segments. So that includes consumer and single family housing, multifamily housing, community facilities, small businesses and farms, schools, community and community-based solars, and then lastly, electric vehicles and infrastructure. And we're doing this in 3 different ways. So we're making loans to community lenders. We're also doing direct investments into qualified projects. And then we have a series of standardized products where we are trying to do that market transformational work that Doug talked about early by creating standardized products that serve these different market segments. Okay, next slide. So just wanted to give you a taste and a flavor of those various products that we have. So this is offered by the Community Preservation Corporation, Climate Capital, which is one of the partners in our coalition. So they will be doing direct lending, subordinate construction or construction to permanent debt financing for multifamily residential housing. And basically their products are designed to support the incremental use of energy efficiency improvements. And so through their lower cost subordinate loan, to make that as affordable as it would be to not have done those improvements, right? So to lower the cost through affordable financing so that you can add those energy efficiency improvements. So they'll be doing direct loans. They'll also be working with various transaction partners across the country to do subordinate loan purchases while they will purchase those loans which meet the technical requirements for buildings that we have around clean air and save a ton, but that specifically align with those energy efficiency upgrades that we're trying to make. Next slide. On the self-help side and the sort of consumer and single family side, we will have a variety of different products that we're working, and we will be purchasing loans from various consumer and other kinds of lenders across the country. Oftentimes, many of them CDFIs, as Doug alluded to. And so those include under green mortgages, we will do purchase of a net zero ready home. Under solar, we will be financing solar panels and battery storage for single family households. And under electric vehicles, be doing new and used electric vehicles for consumer financing. So that is the self-help products that we're offering. And then next slide. And then Climate United, the third partner of the coalition, which is underneath Calvert Impact, has 3 kind of initial focus areas, but we are, as we shared, serving many of the other market segments. And so those three initial areas of focus include community solar and community-based solar. And so that we are specifically working to do pre-development financing, oftentimes knowing that that is some of the hardest stages in solar financing, and really trying to advance models that support low income and disadvantaged communities and community ownership models. We're also working around electric buses and heavy duty trucks. So trying to make sure that we can bring cost parity for buying electric vehicles that is similar to that of a diesel vehicle through our financing. And then thirdly, but not last, working on community infrastructure and as well as commercial financing. So working to influence existing school financing and CPACE markets to incentivize zero emission building standards and renovation and construction. So we will, of course, be serving all those different market segments, but those are where we're starting and where a lot of our early attention is going. And so as we think about what our rollout and looks like, this is the whole timeline of where we've been through our journey as Climate United. And we are in the stage, maybe some of you saw it, but we did finance our first deal with the University of Arkansas, serving to with a solar developer there that will be doing solar with that university system. So very exciting. So we are starting to do that good work that we have been entrusted with. Over time, we have continued to build and staff up. So we have been, if you go to our webpage, you will see we have many, many different job offers and opportunities going right now as we continue to staff up. So with the hope that we would be fully operational in Q1 of 2025 and be able to really hit the pavement to start meeting with communities and in community to learn and understand different needs. So that is the basics of our structure and strategy. Yeah, I think that's it from me. And it looks like maybe we have some questions in the chat, but happy to answer those now or to wait to the end, whatever you all prefer.
Thanks, Crystal. We'll do them all at the end. Can you hear me? Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, so thanks so much, Crystal. Now we're going to turn over to our next speaker, Stephen K. Brown II, who's Chief Network Officer for Coalition for Green Capital. Stephen?
All right, thanks, Doug, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today. As Doug mentioned, my name is Stephen Brown. I am the Chief Network Officer for the Coalition for Green Capital. CGC has been in the process of trying to create this national green bank and clean power platform over the last decade and some change now. And so we are very grateful to EPA and the administration for selecting us to be one of the NCIF awardees. And so next slide, please. So we'll do a little bit of overview on CGC and then talk about kind of our programmatic structure and think about equity and how we view equity, and then describe some of our financial products, and then close out with our basic investment thesis. Next slide, please. Similar slide as Crystal's. So I think you all saw this language before. So next slide. Since we're in the same space, the same boat here. So as I mentioned before, the Coalition for Green Capital has been doing the work for quite some time now. And really, before the IRA, our work has been focused on creating and building a national network of self-sustainable, economically self-sufficient green banks across the country. And so I think Doug mentioned earlier how that took shape, starting with really Connecticut being one of the first, and then expanding out from there. But our basic mission is to provide for the public and private partnerships needed in order to deploy financing in a way that really begins to accelerate investments in clean energy technologies, and do it in a way where all communities can be positively impacted by it, either through health benefits, economic development, job creation, and reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. And so you can see here our kind of where our network is today in terms of our sub awardees. And so we have 16 Green Bank sub awardees, 2 national partners that make up our coalition. My job as Chief Network Officer, obviously, is to fill in the rest of the pieces here and begin to either identify and resource organizations that have been on the ground doing the work and are ready to scale, or to identify new and emerging organizations that may be doing other things, whether it's CDFIs, community-based credit unions, or what have you, or minority depositories, and providing them the resources to begin to really lean into green lending and pivot towards being seen as kind of the flagship partner in that state. And so to date, we have about 15 states covered. We have 2 subs in the same state, so we have 15 states covered. Our goal is by the end of next year to have this entire map filled with partners and to provide them not only with some concessionary capital to begin lending, but also to provide them with co-investment opportunities that they will do with CGC as we also do some direct investing ourselves. And so we are essentially splitting investment responsibilities between our network of partners, which I manage, and then CGC. We have an investment team that will also be focused on deploying capital as well. And so the next couple of slides are going to more describe our investment strategy from the national perspective, knowing that there's going to be some flexibility in how local green banks may choose to deploy capital. Okay. And so just to give you a sense of our expected impacts over the next 3, 5, 7 years and out. The estimates, which I would imagine will be similar with many of the other awardees in this space, but the potential benefits to this program could be extremely significant and substantive in the communities that you all serve and live in. And so we want to be a partner and a collaborator with you in those local communities, so that you can also see the benefits of having this type of money deployed into your communities and achieving the kind of multiplier effect of not only energy cost savings going down for families, health benefits improving, abatements of GHG emissions, but also job creations and other economic development that could be catalyzed through the NCIF. Next slide, please. This metric here describes our equity strategy. And so Crystal mentioned that they have a 60% commitment to LIDACs, and I think 40% was the minimum. CGC is going to land at a minimum of 50% as our floor, but have this metric feed into our investment decision making. And so what it does, it lists 3 major goals that we have, are the activities that we'll achieve, the 7 ways we will measure each investment that CGC makes, and then the goals that we have that are associated with that investment, and be able to report on this 357 framework on an annual basis to both local communities as well as the EPA and Congress. Next slide, please. And so to give you kind of a sense of the different types of project types we will be looking at, very similar to what Crystal mentioned before as it relates to distributed energy, net zero buildings, and zero emissions transportation. We will lean heavily on distributed energy portion of it. And so, kind of expect CGC, at least at the national level, to really be focused on investing in power generation assets, transmission, interconnection assets, as well as storage, battery storage assets, to really achieve a greater volume of impact through those types of investments that are also going to attract capital from the private sector as well to be a part of those investments. So on the distributed energy side of the house, we will typically spend a lot of our focus at CGC on those types of projects, and then allowing our network of partners to begin to really focus in on net zero buildings as well as EV infrastructure and EV loans. Not that they are limited to those two, but we would expect our portfolios to really reflect CGC's focus more on the distributed side of things and our network partners focus on the other things, with there being some overlap in between. But by and large, that will be the breakdown. Next slide, please. And then just kind of give you a sense of the types of projects that we will be looking to focus on. And the junior debt category here is really going to be where CGC will look to focus in on. So we expect to take a junior position on large projects, which kind of, reinforces kind of our investment approach that I mentioned on the previous slide. But being able to identify projects and that are close to closing and closer to being greenlit, and then being able to sleeve in some capital to really allow it to close and move forward in advance is where we would likely be situated. So anticipate that we'll be looking at a junior position in most projects, although not all. And again, if there is ever any additional funds from EPA or from Congress to do more work, then we may be looking at more senior positions. But right now, with what we have, we think the best use of our dollars is to be in a junior position. We will be investing in some loan loss reserves or credit enhancements. Not really much in terms of equity, though. And so if you were to kind of look at our financial product portfolio, it will reflect junior debt being the majority of the investments that we'll make, probably followed then behind senior debt and credit enhancements, and then equity fourth. Next slide. And so the basic thesis of our work is speed, right? We know that in order to really meet this $1 trillion moment with the money that we've been awarded, we have to move fast and we have to scale fast. And so we will be looking at investments to speed the deployment of capital into investments, speed the rate of our recycling of those dollars into secondary markets, and then to be able to scale large projects to have a big impact on the communities that we're serving. Yeah, so that will be the way that you'll see us in your communities at the direct level. And again, obviously, our network partners may present differently, and they have the freedom to do that. And so, it really will be a case of us connecting you to those network partners at the local level. And if you don't have a green bank or anyone that is operating as a green bank today, then we would love to work with you to identify other organizations that might be able to take the helm in that community and to do this work on our behalf and to serve your community in that way. I believe that is the last slide. Yep, it is. Thank you so much for inviting us, and we look forward to questions at the end of the presentations.
Thank you, Stephen. Next, we're going to turn to our third presenter. We have Rahul Young, who is Senior Director of Community Engagement at Rewiring America and member of the Power Forward Communities Coalition. Rahul, over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Doug. Hi, everyone. As Doug mentioned, my name is Rahul Young. I'm the Senior Director of Community Engagement at Rewiring America, based in San Francisco, and representing the Power Forward Communities Coalition. Next slide, please. Just a little bit about Rewiring America. We are a relatively new nonprofit, founded a couple years ago and growing quickly to 130 plus staff now. And our focus is on electrifying everything, specifically focusing on the residential sector. Next slide, please. And just a little context for why that's our focus. So the work that we've done shows that 87% of total US emissions come from energy, and 42% of those emissions come from decisions that American households make around the kitchen table. How do you heat your homes, heat and cool your homes? How do you heat your water? How do you cook your food? How do you get around? How do you dry your clothes? And so our goal is to really try to make real change happen in US climate emissions by putting the power in people's hands. And the NCIF funding is going to be a big part of helping to accelerate that work. Next slide, please. So, as I said, because 42% of those emissions come from decisions that we can actually make, we have to actually affect the 124 million homes and apartments that exist in America to be able to achieve our climate goals. And the great opportunity that GGRF and the NCIF program gives us is that we can really focus this funding in low-income and disadvantaged communities to really try to make sure that this is an equitable transition, and really have this be something that improves people's lives, both kind of the nature of their homes, but also their local economies and jobs, and hopefully to, wherever possible, reduce costs for folks in their day-to-day lives as well. Next slide, please. So we are part of the Power Forward Communities Coalition. You'll see the 5 organizations that are part of our coalition here that I'll tell you more about in a second. But collectively, across the 5 organizations, we have over 10,000 local employees, and a presence in communities all around the country, specifically through United Way and Habitat's affiliates, as well as Enterprise and Enlist's local offices. And that gives us a lot of deep experience in the world of affordable housing, over $13 billion deployed already through various tax credits, debt and equity, and a lot of grant experience that preceded GGRF, over $7 billion in federal grants deployed across 4,000 programs over the last decade. Next slide, please. So you already heard me talk a little bit about Rewiring America, but I'll just say our primary focus is really on the single-family rehab market when it comes to electrification. And we have a lot of different kind of data, software, programmatic tools that can help local governments and communities think through what electrification can mean for them. Enterprise and Enlist, the 2 of the biggest multifamily financiers and developers in the country, tons of experience in decarbonization. So both Enterprise and Enlist primarily focused on the multifamily sector, although they both have single family programs that will be part of NCIF as well. And of course, a lot of work in almost all of the major cities around the country, and a fair amount of experience in rural and tribal communities as well. Habitat for Humanity, of course, one of the biggest single-family home builders in the nation. So primarily in this program, focusing on the single-family new construction side of things, operating across all 50 states, and they also serve as a mortgage lender for low-income households. And then finally, United Way, clearly a well-established organization with a 130-plus-year track record of partnering with low-income communities, and chapters serving all 50 states. And that includes a 211 hotline that reaches over 50,000 households daily, people who are reaching out to them to figure out how am I going to pay my energy bills? How am I going to pay rent? How do I get connected to these programs? So collectively, the impact of all these organizations really allows us to, 1, build from a place of trust in communities around the country, and through the work that folks are doing, be able to touch folks who wouldn't normally be drawn into the world of climate and electrification, but who are just looking for ways to try to be able to make ends meet and make their families' lives better. And so our hope is that this really allows us to expand the market for this program going forward. Next slide, please. So our particular award for Power Forward Communities under the NCIF program is $2 billion. Like the other awardees you've heard from, this is a 7-year program that just started now that we've completed the paperwork with EPA. And really the rest of the year for us is going to be around getting the pieces in place, making sure that we've got all the requirements met. And then we start to launch our program in the first quarter of next year. Next slide, please. So, across all the different sectors in residential electrification, whether it be single family rehab, single family new construction, or the multifamily sector, these are still the 3 things that we are most focused on. How do we deal with high upfront costs? How do we deal with what is in most cases a very complicated process? And how do we close the awareness gap? How do we help people understand that this is something that they can control and that there are significant benefits they can take advantage of for our households? Next slide, please. And so what you'll see from us as we start to roll out solutions over the next year is to try to work to have various ways to deal with the high upfront costs. We currently have an RFP on the street with heat pump manufacturers to really work to lower and cap both equipment and installation costs for heat pumps specifically, and we'll be expanding those to other technologies as well. And then work to pair that with subsidized financing to make monthly payments for folks as low as possible. How do we make sure that we take a complicated process and make it much simpler for folks? So how do we find the right set of digital tools, the right processes, et cetera, to be able to make this as streamlined as possible when folks want to electrify their homes? And then ultimately, how do we close the awareness gap? How do we find the right balance of mass market communication, marketing, et cetera, and then hands-on home navigators who can really help people navigate the entire process from start to finish to make sure that they get the right technologies installed into their homes and they have the best process possible that they really can feel great about at the end. Next slide, please. So again, here's a little bit more detail on some of the things that we'll be planning to roll out. Again, on the financial side, thinking about capped pricing on technologies and installation, subsidized financing, and thinking about other ways that we can mobilize private capital to help reduce costs as well and help private companies that are trying to meet their carbon goals be able to help use that to subsidize home electrification. We already have and will be continuing to roll out a suite of digital tools at the community level to help communities, cities, towns figure out which are the types of households that they want to target to help increase the chances that they can actually achieve bill savings wherever possible. How do we help individual homeowners and renters be able to navigate the different technologies and what order of events make sense for them? And then how do we have the right data analysis through the cube that we've set up to be able to make sure that we really have the right data to drive our decisions and be able to kind of line that up with measurement and verification on the back end to ensure that programs are meeting their goals. And then again, on the program services, what's the right mixture of home navigators, as well as contractor networks and contractor ops support, and installation QA and aftercare, again, to make sure that this is the best possible program and experience for the folks who participate. Next slide, please. So we really see our NCIF program kind of coming in these 3 stages. So as I mentioned, the rest of this year is to get our program stood up. Then we really want to launch in a handful of communities in 2025 and make sure that we understand what this is going to look like. And this is specifically for Rewiring America's work, but it'll be a similar stage across all of Power Forward communities. How do we pilot this, make sure that we understand this, make sure that we're meeting EPA's goals in communities around the country, and then have it lead to rapid expansion in the next couple of years and then large scale adoption, so that, like the other NCIF awardees that you heard from, that by the end of the program, we really are working across all of 10 EPA's regions, and we have a truly national program that is touching all the different types of communities that we want to make sure that everybody understands that electrification can benefit everyone across the country. Next slide. And so then this is just a kind of a sample of some of the tools and financial solutions that you'll be seeing. And again, more to come on this around the end of the year and early next year. So on the single family side, thinking through kind of what are the ways that we can provide financial assistance for electrification retrofits, repairs, net zero new construction, contractor lines of credit, and solar installation. On the multifamily side, on the financial side, similarly thinking through electrification retrofits and rehabs, incentive bridge loans, net zero rehab and new construction, and solar installation as well. And in the middle, a suite of market building activities that we think really can catalyze this work across the country. aggregating demand so that we can negotiate these discounts with heat pump manufacturers and other technology manufacturers, creating the right planning tools that folks can access and communities can access to accelerate their work, creating the right help desks and navigators and technical assistants that can help streamline the process, and then ultimately to kind of really drive workforce development so that we have the educated and empowered workforce to meet the demand that we hope to drive through this work going forward. Next slide, please. And finally, this is just a sample of the communities that provided letters of support when we first submitted our GGRF application and who we hope to connect with over the next few years. And we hope to be adding more and more dots to this map, as we'll talk about in the Q&A. Next slide, please. And with that, you can always find more about Power Forward by going to powerforwardcommunities.org and filling out our intake form on that site, or you're welcome to connect with me directly at this email as well.
Thanks, Raul, and thanks, other speakers. We're going to roll into Q&A now. I think the slides are down. You can stop making me so big if you want, but I'm also happy to stay big if that's better. So got a bunch of questions. I think they're in a couple different buckets. One bucket is, how can cities get access to this program specifically? What's the thinking around cities? Another bucket is really around the kind of products you all have for specific opportunities. And then I think there's some questions around timing of some of these opportunities, given what some of you have laid out. So I'm going to jump right in to the question about, cities. How can they, cities are not like every other entity. I know it's early, but can you share some thoughts generally about how cities can plug in to your organizations? And I'll let everyone answer. Let's start with Crystal, then we'll go to Raul and Stephen.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So the quickest and easiest way would be to go through our website. I'll put it here. But we have an intake form where folks can just go in and express interest and share a little bit around the kind of work that you want to be doing. At which point you would be matched with a partner, so CPC, self-help, or Calvert Impact or Climate United Fund, based on sort of what your focus area or interest is. And then generally would be meeting with one of the team members there to start and dive in a little bit around what the needs are in your community. So that's generally our process. And over time, I think we will continue to try to develop. I shared, for example, the term sheets of CPC, Climate Capital, and get more resources like that available on our website so that it's more clear to navigate and understand what our different product offerings are. But for now, please just hit up the intake form, and we would love to connect and learn more about your needs.
Great, and I can go next. Similarly, I'll also put a link in the chat that I just mentioned in my presentation, and where you can also go and kind of read a little bit more about Power Forward Communities work. And we also at the bottom of that page have an intake form similarly. So would love for folks to fill that out. And while we're standing up the program, our hope is later this year we'll be able to kind of go back through the list and really start to connecting with folks. So similarly, make sure that we understand where your community is in your community electrification process, understand your priorities, what gaps you're seeing and what needs you have, and then to really try to think through where we can connect you with the various partners at Power Forward Communities, whether it be on the single family new construction, single family rehab side, multifamily side, and just make sure that we're kind of laying out what the next steps are as well. So I think really kind of reaching out to us that way, and then we'll have an initial conversation and figure out how to direct you is the way to start. And I'll hand it off to Stephen.
Yeah, just in time. I just found the link that I wanted to share with y'all. So thanks for letting me go last there. I am going to send a link in the chat that will invite you all to a webinar we're going to have on the 18th. It is for the launch of our Net Zero Communities initiative, where it should really give everyone an opportunity to understand What I didn't talk about earlier was on the market building grant part of the work that, we have some limited funds to do some grant making, but we're going to structure our grant making through this Net Zero Communities initiative. We'll be looking at communities that have climate plans, net zero plans in place, and figure out how our grant dollars might help to move those plans into execution mode and implementation mode in coordination with our network partners at the local level and other, community stakeholders at the local level. So I would encourage everyone to join in on the webinar on the 18th. If you're not able to do so, I'm sure they will share my email address with you, and you can feel free to reach out to me for more information about that program. But outside of the Net Zero Communities Initiative, obviously we also have this network of green banks that are really our public-facing, local-facing branch of CGC, and we're hopeful that those connections can be made between our local partners and local governments. And again, if you don't have a green bank in your state or city, reach out to me and let's figure out if there is something there that is kind of moving towards that, or B, if perhaps there needs to be something created. And we would very much want to work with you on and get your guidance on how we fill those voids, those gaps in the market.
Thank you all for those responses. Just quickly, I think you already answered this a little bit, Stephen, but there's questions about zero interest loans and for governments and grants. Do any of you provide zero interest loans or grants to governments? Lightning round.
All right. Yeah. So the grant, we will be able to use the grant for market building and pre-development in a way that cities and local governments can benefit from. And so you'll learn more about that on the 18th. And then secondly, our network partners will have any number of green loan products that will be available in local markets. And so, again, we want to make sure that you're connected to those entities to better understand how we can facilitate you all being able to access any of those products that make sense in your local communities.
Raul, do you have any grants or zero interest loans for cities?
Generally not for our work, because our work is focused on residential. Most of the financial assistance is going to be going directly to either kind of homeowners and tenants who are working on their homes, or developers and financiers. In some cases, that could be routed through, let's say, a public housing authority. So there could be some examples of that, but for the most part, it will not be kind of going directly to local governments. However, we really do see our work interfacing directly with local governments and community goals. And so we think that, one of the major stakeholders working with us will be local governments, and that could be kind of mayors, city council people, sustainability directors, housing directors, et cetera. So we hope that we'll get to work directly with folks and be able to channel the dollars to help you achieve their goals, even if they're not going directly to cities per se.
Crystal, same question for you.
Yeah. So I shared in the chat, generally our pricing is based on whether a project is located in a low income and disadvantaged community. So we do go all the way down to zero for projects, and then up sort of based on need, and as well as sort of all the traditional underwriting processes that you would expect a financing entity to go through. And then I would just say, in general, we also will have a pre-development grant program that's going to be going live here over the next month or two. That is not specifically for cities, that's for nonprofit organizations that are located in your cities that to support pre-development needs that you might have. So as you have projects and partners in the communities that you're serving, that would be a potentially great way for you to support early stage projects in your cities.
Great. So some specific questions for some folks. Maybe this is one last general one. So this is a 7-year program. I know Some of you have announced, I mean, I know the Climate United made a loan. The other two have announced they're going to be really gearing up in the next couple months. If a city isn't ready to seek financing yet, how will there be additional windows in future years? How are you thinking about, allocating funding over the program? And how would the city is not ready now be able to approach you later? I'll start with Raul.
Sure. So I mean, again, I think connecting with us via powerforwardcommunities.org is a great thing to do no matter where you are in your own stage of development. And we're happy to talk with you. And just again, in the short term, if you're not ready to move forward with financing, and we aren't either, so that works perfectly, happy to connect you with tools and resources and just to understand what your needs are. As we kind of come up with the models that we really are convinced are working well and roll it out in a wider scale, there'll be opportunities for communities to actually more actively propose their projects to be able to get financing as well, and for us to more actively guide you through the process too. So I mean, we really do see this as a 7-year program, but we're hoping to establish those relationships now over the next few months so that we can guide those dollars in the future. So I think connecting with us at powerforwardcommunities.org is the right first step, and then there'll be kind of more formal application processes to come in 2025 and beyond.
Crystal.
Yeah. So we were established, we're all parts of the National Clean Investment Fund. So even though we do have certain deployment goals by certain timelines, like we're all established to exist in perpetuity to serve the United States in the clean energy transition. So we will be here when your project is ready 3 years from now to support and do that work. So no one is behind and no community needs to be left behind. So just would reiterate what Raul said around no worries to reach out no matter what stage you are, and start to have that dialogue now around where your community is, and to continue to, I think one of the hopes of our work is, as in the sort of market transformative aspect of it, is to develop processes, develop products, develop scalable resources that can be replicated in various communities, right? And so, if your community is not there in certain places or doesn't have all the necessary plans or those sorts of things, right? I know one thing about cities is that you oftentimes learn from other cities, right? So there will be this innovation happening across all these different communities, and we're hopeful that we can continue to see and seed that innovation over time.
Thank you. So a couple of questions for some folks that are more specific quickly. So Power Forward, you have
Actually,
a
Doug, real quick,
yeah.
let me just
sorry, Stephen.
Yeah,
Go
no,
ahead.
no worries. I thought Crystal and Rose's comments were spot on, and so I don't have a whole lot to add to that, except that I did put in the chat a link to our portal, our project portal. And so if anyone has projects that they would like for us to look at, you can submit them through that portal. And that portal is always going to live on our site. And our hope is that we actually have I mentioned speed was one of the 3 items that that defines our investment strategy. And so we actually are shooting to deploy in 3 years. And have those deployments be recycled so that we can do more deployments into perpetuity, like Crystal mentioned. And so yeah, you're not behind. But if you do have a project that you think would be interesting for us to take a look at, you can feel free to use that portal whenever you choose.
Great. Thank you, Stephen.
Mm-hmm.
So quickly for Power Forward, there's a question about if you've there's pilot communities being piloted, I guess now or next year. Are those selected? Is there a possibility for someone to propose being a pilot community? How would that happen?
Sure. Yeah, I think the first wave of folks or communities are basically selected in our minds, and I think we'll be publicly announcing that in the next couple months to come. But this is all going to be staged. So I think, again, there's plenty of opportunities here for work to come. So I think if you all are interested in talking about it, please reach out to me, and I'm happy to have a conversation about what that could look like. And I think related to that, to the question around kind of how we made those choices, as you can kind of guess, it's really a mixture of kind of quantitative and qualitative aspects. I mean, ultimately, all of the three bidders have or awardees have the goal of trying to make sure that we really show kind of a healthy cross section of communities around the country to kind of show that this is something that can touch urban and rural places, red state and blue states and purple states, and kind of a wide mix of places. And so that certainly factored into our selection. Of course, we want to be data driven and try to think through where are the places that can benefit most from these changes, both from a carbon and a bill reduction perspective. And then there's always going to be a qualitative component, where we have relationships built, where we know that there's positive momentum happening, and where we have a clear-eyed sense of kind of what the gaps are that exist, that we know that the work that we're doing can be complementary. That's really the magic that kind of comes together that I think will lead to positive projects. And so that's really what we want to continue to build with folks. But the relationship building part of that is valuable for us to do now.
Thanks, Rahul. And Stephen, just there's a question about your transportation strategy. I know that you said CGC itself is focused mainly on, if I understand you correctly, generation, storage, interconnection, transmission. But what about transportation? There's a question about whether you consider a significant investment in buses, and broader transportation infrastructure.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, as it relates to opportunities for like fleet conversions, so if a city or local government is interested in converting their ICE fleet into an EV fleet, for instance, I think we'd be very interested in having a conversation with you about that, and whatever corresponding infrastructure is needed in order to facilitate that transition would also be very interesting to us. I do think public transportation is something that is also intriguing as well. And so if your local transit authority is looking at opportunities to electrify either their buses or what have you, we would also be interested in seeing how we might be able to partner and assist in that. Actually, my background is actually in transit, and so I would love the ability to figure out how I can blend those two worlds together, and maybe looking at some conversations at the national level with APTA and some other national organizations to see if there is a bigger play here than one-off anecdotal opportunities or projects, but there's a way for us to facilitate movement of capital in the public transit space that achieves our GGRF objectives. I would be very interested in learning more about what that could look like and how we can get that accomplished.
Okay, well, thank you, Stephen. Unfortunately, we're out of time for the questions. I'm going to hand it back over to David Medina to close us out. Thanks, everyone.
Doug, thank you. Thank our panelists. Thanks to all of our participants. You all shared a lot of great information and had great discussions. So thank you for all of that. Everyone, just a reminder that we record all these sessions, so you'll be able to refer back to them. And we'll also be answering questions that have come up that we didn't answer through our FAQs on our website. Before you leave today, we hope you'll share your feedback on our Zoom poll, which should be popping up on your screen any minute now. And while you're filling that poll out, we hope that you will join us for our next session. It'll be on Tuesday, October 29th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Very interesting topic. We'll be hosting a session on the revised Uniform Grants Guidance issued by the White House Office of Management and Budget. And that guidance clarified that federal grantees, and that includes cities, can invest some of their federal funds to help build and use evidence and data to improve outcomes. So important topic, very cross-cutting. You can register for this session using the link that we just posted in the chat. and you can also find it on our website. So hope you enjoyed today's discussions, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.